we need to talk about just how stupid it is to oppose God, how foolish it seems, how it feels like you have the upper hand, but actually you're a fool. It's not going to go well for you.
Like, what a way to start.
Today, we're looking at Esther chapter 6 to 10. Basically, the most famous, I would guess, the most famous part of this story is that dear Haman is going to make a couple of missteps. And there's a couple of common ingredients here. There's significant pride and arrogance. There is also God's providential hand being over everything. And Mordecai's like humble faithfulness.
So I think it's kind of funny you start the episode that way. One, because it just sounds ridiculous, but it is very true. We were watching just like some random news today, and it's pretty unsettling to just see the amount of evil in the world.
Yeah.
On like governmental like layers to all the way down to like the nitty gritty you and me everyday stuff. But when you feel overwhelmed by like people in like very powerful positions that seem like they are definitely on the track toward very evil things, it can wear you down. It can like seriously bum you out. And I know I felt that tension today of just like, oh man, like there's bad stuff in this world. But then there's this like relieving factor of like, what's crazy, though, is that God, he's already more powerful than what seems so nuts. Like, the most powerful and scary thing around you, God is already beyond it, if not, like, able to squash it in a second. So I think what's crazy about reading about these two super powerful individuals, one who was ready to basically wipe out the entire Jewish population that would have eventually like ruined the possibility of Christ coming. God's just like, okay, yeah, you guys think you're really something, but I have like I'm the creator of this entire world. Like I've already overcome you before you thought you were as good as you were. So I think that's just like a reassuring feeling. Like anytime you go against God, you've already lost. So it's a powerful thought to just think about the limitations that we have, and the scariest thing you can think of, He's already conquered it.
I talked yesterday about how when Haman makes this decree, Mordecai tells Esther about it, and then Esther wisely declares a fast, like a 3-day fast and prayer. She doesn't even let the people drink. And everybody just kind of like goes straight to God. Mm-hmm. I think that is a significant piece to take away from Esther. There's several cool little pieces in Esther, but I think a significant one is, okay, they are confronted with significant wickedness. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, you talk about people that are making crazy decisions. You talk about people that you know are actively seeking after Satan in his direction. That's pretty wicked stuff. Like, that's pretty crazy, just overwhelming stuff. And our response should be like Esther's, to go straight to God, to deny ourselves, to seek counsel from the Lord and ask the Lord to act. Like, hey, God, you got to do something here because this is evil. I can see that it's evil. I need you to work on our behalf to honor your name. And he does. And so the funny thing that gets set up here in chapter 6 to 10 is that the King Ahasuerus, King Xerxes, is not able to sleep. So he's reminded by reading over this book of noble acts that Mordecai had saved his life. And so he goes to Haman and says, hey, I'd love for you to give me some good ideas on how to really honor somebody. And Haman immediately is like, oh my goodness, he must be talking about me. Which is just incredible pride and arrogance. That is incredible pride and arrogance that I have experienced in my own life. With certainty, I've experienced that and thought too highly of myself. It's just silly. Like if you've ever been in a situation like that, you know how stupid it feels on the other side. Like when it's like, oh, they must be going to honor me. It looks like I'm going to get that promotion. It looks like I'm going to get that pat on the back. And then it's like, oh, thanks for your input. We can't wait to honor Mordecai. You're like, oh, snap. So that is what happens to Haman. Haman is kind of like setting up this wonderful plan for himself that he would wear the royal robes. He even makes sure to outline that like the king has worn them before. Mm-hmm. And then he's supposed to be paraded around on a horse, and there's supposed to be a guy declaring how wonderful he is. And then the king's like, good, Do that for Mordecai, and make sure you tell everybody how wonderful he is.
Oh man, that probably like killed him inside. Now, granted, he's like a super evil guy, but it's interesting how again God is like laughing at this. I'm assuming like you guys are so silly. Like
Yeah.
this is ridiculous. You
Yeah.
think you're these big cool guys that have it all together. You've got every single like step laid out ahead of you, and that like clearly slaps old Haman in the face in this story.
Well, it's wild too because Haman had just finished completing these enormous gallows to have Mordecai hung on, and the only way that this could have been arranged the way that it is if God was in control of the situation.
Yeah.
So Esther declares this fast. The king, for some reason, cannot sleep. That reason is God. He is reminded of Mordecai's faithfulness, and he seeks to honor Mordecai, which is because of God. And then Haman accidentally honors Mordecai, and then Esther is able to make the case that Haman needs to be hung on the gallows that he built for Mordecai. So it's wild. The whole story is wild. Okay, so there's a couple historical notes that I want to recognize here. One, we talked about yesterday about how this is King Xerxes, who was the leader of
a little confusing there.
He's the leader of the guys, if you've seen the movie 300, he's the leader of the army that comes against the Spartans when he's trying to invade Greece through Thermopylae, and he is unable to do so.
That's such a weird movie.
So he's
also.
a super wicked king, super crazy, powerful guy. That is what he's most well known for. One of the historical pushbacks on this story, outside of the ones we talked about yesterday, if you didn't hear that, go back and check it out. But one of the pushbacks is like, okay, so Mordecai ends up being like this Jewish guy ends up being Xerxes' right-hand man. Like, how does that even make sense?
Well, think back to Joseph and Pharaoh. It never does make sense, does it?
That's what's really interesting. There's a long history of really prominent, faithful people that end up being like vice presidents to really evil, wicked people. And God puts them in those positions. You think about Daniel, you think about Joseph, like it happens. And so here Mordecai's in that role. And a lot of people say like, hey, we have Persian history. There's no Mordecai in there. But one of the interesting things is there is a guy named Marduk or Marduka. And many people believe that that is like the Persian variant of Mordecai. So there actually are cuneiform tablets that record that Xerxes had this right-hand leader named Marduka, which is like the Persian equivalent of Mordecai. So we actually have like some, it's a little bit flimsy. It's not the strongest historical evidence that we have.
But there's something. It's not just an absent person.
There is a case to be made for it. There's also like a cuneiform tablet that talks about Xerxes' queen, and the name that it lists, I forget the name that it lists, I don't have it in front of me here, but it could be a variant of the name Esther as well. The goofy part is it could also be a variant of the name Vashti, which either way actually confirms some of the information that's listed in the book
Bible,
of Esther. Like if it's Vashti, that's what the book says. If it's Esther, that's what the book says. So it's Esther has a little bit more flimsy historical background than some of the other historical books that we've looked into. And there's a lot of pushback across history towards this story, but it is not without evidence, and it is somewhat loosely supported. And so it does help us actually firm up like what God is doing here. It helps us have faith in text, faith in the story, even though there is pushback, there is also evidence. And it's pretty incredible. Like one of the things you said at the beginning, Jenny, is that had Haman been successful, there wouldn't be a Jesus, there wouldn't be a Joseph, there wouldn't be a Mary, there wouldn't be a Paul, like it just wouldn't happen. And so this is how God chooses to keep his people.
Well, and what's interesting too is it talks a lot about, you said Purim, I say Purim, I don't know.
I probably said it wrong.
I taught a lot about this when I used to teach third grade at a Christian school. We would always talk about the book of Esther, but would talk a little bit about Purim and do like we made little cookies that were the shape of Haman's hat. They're called Hamantash, and I believe that's how you say it, or Haman, whatever.
Wow.
Regardless, super cool, fun stuff. However, this holiday is like still celebrated today by Jewish people, still recognized because of like the promise that God had given to Abraham all the way back, that he would give so many generations that eventually Jesus would come from this. So like all these generations are like following through with this celebration. However, for us, it's not necessarily like something that we have to reflect on. Like, we don't have to celebrate this. This isn't something that we're like, feel like we need to be obligated to. However, something that we like can take from this, because when I read this, I oftentimes think like, this isn't really for me. But what I can, I guess, recognize from this is God's sovereign plan over a people that he was, I guess, what would you say? He's like he's keeping together in order to bring Jesus so that I can also like be a part of this family as a Christian because of what God did through Esther to be able to like preserve his line so that Jesus could come and save and rescue the world.
So actually, you could make that a your part, I suppose. But I think another interesting your part is being against God is stupid. You just shouldn't do it. I mean, and there are times in our lives where it seems like wicked people have the upper hand, but when we are faithful and true to the Lord, we know that He always has the upper hand.
And whenever you make that conscious decision in your mind that you're going to be against God, or you're going to be against God's laws or his people or any of those things, you've already lost. You've already lost the fight, because we know that like God is all powerful. He is and was and always will be. When you decide to come up against him, you've already lost. So thanks for joining us today. Thanks for joining us for Esther. We'll see you guys back tomorrow.
Thanks so much for listening to God's Plan, Your Part. If anything stuck out to you, if you have any questions, or if you'd like to receive a Bible, you can email us at godsplanyourpart@gmail.com. Also, if you're enjoying the podcast, please consider supporting us through the link in our description. We love that you're on this journey with us, and we hope you have a great day. See you tomorrow.